Well, I know there's a lot of energy and enthusiasm around hearing the reflections from our youth, and so I want to give a quick note on how we'll structure this part. We've asked our youth to prepare a few comments on their reflections about the last 2 days, items that particularly rang true for you, maybe things that were surprising to you, those types of comments. And then we have a couple questions that were part of the planning committee and also submitted by the youth, kind of pre-programmed questions that I will ask, and then we'll open to the audience to take any questions from you. So I think, Alexa, we'll start with you. We'll have you guys give 3 to 5 minutes of your own reflections. Thank you.
Hi. First off, what I noticed, at least for my opinion, is that I agree with what William Myers was just saying, that there needs to be a universal definition of what bullying actually is. And in my opinion, I think that there should be a universal law throughout the entire country, or at least throughout the state, because personally, I go to a private school. And what happens in my school of bullying versus what happens in a public school might be considered different. And also, the way to handle those might be considered different. If there was a universal definition, then we could educate the younger kids as to what is considered bullying, so maybe that would stop it more in the future. Going on with definitions, I think there needs to be a clarity between what's considered cyberbullying and what isn't, or if cyberbullying is really considered bullying or whether it's just online harassment. And I think that though the media and online bullying can be negative and lead to cyberbullying, which obviously I know because that's what I do, or that's what I've had in the past, I think that instituting ways to prevent bullying can be helpful. For example, I don't know if anyone has seen the MTV commercials, but there's commercials where it's like a thin line between words and wounds. And I think that if kids actually see what can happen and what actually can hurt someone and how bullying can affect someone, literally seeing examples of effects, I think that would make a huge difference.
Thank you so much. We'll have Glenn next.
Can everyone hear me? Great. All right. First of all, I'd like to thank the planning committee for allowing us to be here, and Chair Professor Fred Rivera, so thank you. To say that these past few days have been extremely stimulating is just a severe understatement. It's an honor to be with some of the greatest minds in bullying research. And to start off, I really wanted to just point out like how I felt that Professor Juvenin's analysis on ethnic diversity being a key factor and a key lens to analyze like who is being marginalized in particular. Because what really jumped out to me was that like a lot of students just think, why me? Because it's very easy to just scapegoat racism or something else to be that reason. And so I believe that on the micro level, teachers should be encouraged to analyze why someone is being targeted in particular. Because often these vulnerabilities are what is exactly being exploited. And so if the teacher's aware of it, maybe they can actually do something to stop it. Something else that really was really poignant was the fact that like one friend like reduces the chance of being bullied. So I think that maybe it should be integrated into curriculums, like more group work should be integrated into curriculums, because targets are often introverts and don't really put themselves out there. And so if they're seen as like that weird kid on the side, like incorporating group works, like frequent kind of like speed dating type of things, but in an educational type of frame. If you have that, it sort of humanizes the victim, and maybe it wouldn't necessarily be like a friend-making type of thing, but if you have someone who's instead like Jimmy, instead of that weird kid on the side, maybe next time Jimmy is seen being bullied, someone will step up. So that could be something that could be pretty helpful. And who knows, maybe they could end up finding someone compatible if you're being forced to be in that group work and create that friend and create that strong sort of social network that prevents the bullying. So incorporating that into curriculum is pretty important. I also like Professor Vaillancourt's points, I'm sorry if I butchered your name, by directing like trauma and depression and low cortisol levels to correlating that with people who are being bullied. And I feel like this point needs to be emphasized when you're pushing for legislation that helps out the marginalized because it really, in my opinion, adds complete legitimacy to the issue. If you're comparing it to people who are killing themselves and people who have been through like traumatic experiences such as the Holocaust, if their brain chemistry is showing similar things, that's super legitimate. That's awesome. Yeah, and before I go on what was missing, I just want to commend, namely Professor Abrams, Professor Farkas, and Professor Rohrbach, and there were a few others as well. But I just really like the concise PowerPoints that were up there, and like the emphasis on the graphs. I thought that was pretty important because if you're in a session all day where you're pushing out high volumes of information, and like I don't even have a BA, you all are PhDs. Like we're all trying to process this high level of information. I'd personally speaking anyway. I think it's more important to listen to exactly what's going on to process it all rather than read a bunch of information and then also trying to listen. So it's kind of, I don't know, but just putting that out there. So I just wanted to commend the professors who did do that. And a major factor that I thought was overlooked was just the self-esteem and like validation of like actual validation and confidence of the victim. Now, they say that as millennials, we're entering an age of narcissism. For those who are in like the higher echelons of like the social pyramid, it could be like that could be a good thing as far as like external validation. External validation for like your success and who you are and everything. Like Facebook likes is a huge thing. So if you're getting a lot of Facebook likes, you're considered popular, you're considered the man, that girl, whatever. But those who are targeted, those who are marginalized, they're not getting those Facebook likes. And as we're entering a time where less people are spending time with their parents and more like children anyway, spending less time with their parents and more time with the computer. So if you're in an environment where you're bullied all the time, am I taking too much time? Oh, sorry, I'm almost done. If you're in an environment where you're getting bullied all the time or you're ostracized in your community, and then you're online and you're not getting any sort of external validation, which is what is important as far as self-esteem these days, as far as kids go. Like you're not getting that at home, you're not getting that at school, and you're also not getting that. And like often these kids come from the broken homes as well. So where are you really getting that external validation? Where are you getting that self-worth? That's a really big issue. So in my opinion, there needs to be a campaign that encourages students to love themselves and like a self-worth campaign, the love yourself type of thing, where it brings out their talents or quirks seen as oddities to some could be passions for others. And somehow, some way we need to eliminate the importance of external validation and have people really recognize their self-worth, because I mean, we're all people, we're all meant to be alive, and we all should love ourselves. That's all I have to say.
Whitney. Please stop me if I go over. I have pages upon pages of notes, and I tried to condense them, so just let me know. I want to start by saying we obviously don't have enough time to go through all of the amazing work that you have done that I would like to highlight, because obviously it's immense, and this has been a great conference. So I will say what was missing, because they asked us to do that, but know that you had much more amazing content than anything missing. For parents, I thought parents were really missing from this conversation. I think, if they're not spending time at school, they're going to be spending a lot of time with parents, hopefully. And I think we really need to address how we can equip parents to respond well when their children do come to them with bullying problems. I feel like a lot of them, they don't want their kids to come to them with bullying problems, because that means that their kid isn't popular, which means they may have done something wrong. And I think it all ends up going back to parents finding their identity in their kids. And so I think we really need to start figuring out how we can equip parents to respond well when their kids do come to them with these issues, and not viewing it as a rite of passage issue, because that means no one's taking responsibility for this, and these are real feelings that these children are experiencing. So I think we need to stop taking the lazy way out of considering it that, and I think that's something that schools can possibly help with, because obviously you're going to have the best access to those parents. We were talking at lunch yesterday, and one of the presenters brought up cheer mom, and I thought that was hilarious because that's like what we're dealing with here as far as the identity issue goes. We're watching on TV these cheer moms and these dance moms, and we're viewing it as entertainment, but what it is these moms putting all of everything into their kids because that's the status that they're wanting as parents. And I think parents are a huge issue when it comes to bullying because they're encouraging their kids to act out on the other cheer girl who might be captain against them. And I think that's something that we definitely need to start addressing. I also think, parents are key to helping kids establish relationships. That's the first place kids are going to experience love. And if they don't get these skills at home, then they're not going to be able to take them into schools to make that one friend or the relationships that they need. I also think parents, they're the ones who can take these kids to organizations. They can take them to sports and 4-H and church and use that time to build them up. Not all parents have the luxury of being able to take their kids to all those extracurricular activities. And, I experienced that at the first part of my life, and then fortunately my mom was able to eventually take me to all of those activities. But to the parents who, don't have that luxury, I think we need to encourage them and tell them that's okay. Go home after you're done from a long day at work and just love on your child to where your child is confident enough that they don't feel like they have to belittle other children. And I think we definitely need to just support parents around both sides of the parents around that issue. I also think I loved how you brought up the sibling aggression. I think that's extremely important because how a child feels at home is how they're going to go out into the world. And if they are loved and confident at home, then they're going to go out and do the same thing at school. I remember my parents, I have 3 younger sisters, so fortunately we always got along pretty well, but had my parents not forced us to do so, we may not have, but we're best friends now, and it doesn't matter if one of them goes out to school and something bad happens because they know they're going to go home and they're going to come back to 3 other best friends. And I think if we can instill that into families, that could significantly help them as they're going out into these schools and having to deal with these issues. I also think teachers were missing from this discussion. We addressed the school and the policy side of it, but what it comes down to is the people who can, besides the administrators and the funding aspect, the teachers are the ones who are going to truly address this problem. And, we've already established that kids can't learn when they're distressed. So if you don't care about bullying, you should at least care about your test scores, and that's going to be an issue. I think we need to also address teachers who promote bullying. And I say that, and I also want to say we need to encourage the teachers who are not promoting bullying. I think I got to see 2 sides of it at the school I attended. We have a teacher who unconditionally loves all the students, and all of the students unconditionally love her, and she's there for all of the students, whether they're the homecoming queen or they are the person who has nowhere to go at lunch, like you mentioned, leaving the door open for lunch. She's that teacher that gives these kids confidence. However, my school had a basketball coach who was still in his high school complex of only acknowledging the jocks and the popular kids at school. And that has to be addressed because these are, what your parents and what your teachers and your coaches are thinking about you is you're somehow going to self-identify with that. So we cannot be having teachers and coaches being okay with bullying kids in addition to the students who are doing so. I think the best way to do that is to equip these teachers with their actual hardcore research that was presented, showing them these 2 brains and showing them, oh, you have the power to make this brain grow, like love and support these students, and you can do that. And definitely, I loved the part of the no drama queens because it's easy for teachers to say, well, we're not going to have, she's just a drama queen, or the principal to say that, but that's just an easy way for them to not to have to address the problem. Obviously, that drama queen is feeling something, and if they don't address that, then there's, that's just one more person who's getting bullied. I think for the youth, we talked a lot about how youth want to rebel and everything, and obviously a lot of them do, and it's true. But I think even more so than not wanting to rebel, they don't want to look unintelligent, and they desire respect. And so when we're tailoring these messages, I think we need to start taking the approach to equipping them with the stats that we just heard, letting them know that when I am a cheerleader and I'm like bullying this other cheerleader, it's because I'm wanting her position. And if we start to address that and show students, like, this is what you're actually doing and we know why you're doing it, that's embarrassing for them. That would be embarrassing for me, and that would cause me to not want to do that. I think that can make a huge difference. And kids want to know these stats. Kids want to know what's actually going on. And if we equip them with that knowledge, then that might actually take a totally different spin than just say no to it. I think we need to also address what bullying is outside of the jock and nerd complex. Obviously, that's pretty easy to identify if you're seeing that, but it's harder to identify what bullying is when it is two girls on the same social class bullying one another. It's a lot harder to identify that, and a lot of times, to be honest, I don't think people do. I think we label it as drama, at least for our age, as we mentioned on the PowerPoint. I think that's called drama, but in reality, that can become bullying too, and I think we need to identify that. I also think the one friend, again, I say it, it's so critical. I 100% believe in that, and I think we can best do that through putting kids in organizations like 4-H, FFA, Beta, boys and girls mentoring, all of that. Those are the things that are going to provide those students with a friend. And even if they don't have a friend at their school, they're at least going to be able to know that they have a friend in that organization one county over, and they can text and talk and Facebook with that person all they want. I think that's really important. I also think the language is extremely important that we talked about. That's something I think everyone here would agree with is something a part of middle school, and it only carries over to stereotypes throughout high school. So I love that we're addressing that. I also think teen dating and victimization is huge. I don't know if we talked about that enough today, because for one, I don't know that we address it hardly at all. I know we address violence, but there's a lot outside of just a boyfriend beating a girlfriend too. And I think that's a huge issue right now, and I think that's something we need to work on. I have a friend who's my age, and I asked her, I was like, she's struggling with this issue. And I said, well, think about the best, relationship that you have in your life to model after. Is that the kind of relationship you have right now? And she's like, honestly, I don't have a good relationship to look to. And that was so disheartening, because how can I help her if she doesn't have that relationship to look to? So I think that's an important factor that we need to realize too. Like, these teachers can be showing these relationships, and even more easily, the people in these organizations like 4-H, when you have your extension educator, you can see that they have a good relationship. So we need to be showing teens what positive relationships look like and addressing this problem, because there is a lot of bullying. Messages that teens want to hear. I heard a couple of questions on that. I think, I kind of addressed that with the stats issue. I think they want to hear real, genuine messages. Kind of moving into social media with this too, because I know I'm running over all the time. But I think, Facebook is for juniors and seniors and college students. I think Twitter kind of fits all of the social media ages if they're that far into social media. And I think Instagram, Snapchat, Vine are for the younger generations. And so, or younger generations, I guess juniors and below as far as my sisters go. And, I don't use Instagram nearly like my little sisters do. I use Facebook. So I think that's definitely something, we kind of addressed today, but it's something that we need to keep in mind. Like, there are so many different media outlets that we need to be reaching out to, because there's so many different ages doing different things. In addition to that, pairing that with the messages that teens want to hear, I think Pinterest is a big one, and it never ceases to amaze me how many girls will pin like these quotes from Drake, which is a rapper if you don't know. And it's about Drake telling these girls that they're valued and they shouldn't have to wear makeup and they should be loved and all of this stuff. And sometimes that's crazy to me, but at the end of the day, like, that may be the only messages of someone telling them, oh, you deserve this, like, you deserve to be loved and everything. So I think, you know, if you're doing your social media campaigns, like, don't discount that, because that is what people want to hear. And the more that we can make them believe, like Glenn was saying, as far as their self-confidence and their worth, I think it could be valuable for this message too. In addition, like, teaching kids what real relationships are, and that 37% of reciprocative, that's too low, and that's something that we can all do. I know I'm over time, so I'll end there, but thank you all so much.
Thanks so much. Asher?
Hi. I'd also like to thank everyone who was here, who presented, and who listened all weekend. I was thoroughly impressed the entire time. I found it all completely fascinating, and I was honored to be here. I'll try to organize my thoughts as I'm speaking them, because my notes are fairly disorganized. But I came here this weekend, and I had both a school experience with severe bullying and a school experience with hardly any bullying at all. And through your guys' research that you presented to me, I think I was really able to understand what made the difference between my two schools. And I think the most prevalent, the most convincing to me was this idea of the environment affects where you are. And I heard that from Dr. Hovanen, Dr. Wright, Dr. Dodge, Tom Dishin, Dr. Bradshaw. Everyone kind of was floating around this idea, and I'd just like to present my kind of compilation of it. That if you bring together an environment full of people that are diverse, that have empathy for one another, that accept one another, bullying just won't be a problem. And I can't stress the importance of that. I went to a high school filled with empathy, filled with diversity, racial diversity, sexual orientation diversity, political belief diversity. And we were all there. We were all able to express our ideas. It was an arts high school, so we were really able to express our ideas. And I believe that they're on their 14th year of not having a fight at this high school at all. Contrast that to the school I was at previously that a fight averaged once a week. And I really think that that's the difference. The difference is that you're bringing together these people at a high school age who accept one another and who are happy to be around these other people who are so very different than them. And I think what was missing this week was we talked a lot about, or this couple days, talked a lot about preventing bullying, but I didn't actually see the total preemptive version of that. I saw a lot of, well, if bullying's a problem, here's how to put out the fire. And that's important, because that's the short term, and that's what's going to help the kids who are currently experiencing it. But what would be really interesting is to really just try to plant the right seeds so that we never get, the plants that could burn in the first place. And that's, if you start from the very, very beginning, if you start literally in preschool, in beginning education, in kindergarten, before they even get to grade school, and you teach them empathy, and then you continue to teach them empathy through elementary school, through middle school, when everyone's changing and going through their changes and stuff, then you'll just have this society filled with people who have no need to bully. I think what we're having trouble with is we're trying to fix this pyramid society. But the truth is, in order to survive this pyramid society, bullying is a pretty easy way to survive it. It's how you get to the top. So why not just restructure that? Try to not make it a pyramid in the first place. There's no reason it needs to be. high school I went to was not structured that way. There were no popular kids. There were no nerds or whatever. And I think that there is academic validity to empathy, and that if you teach this in your curriculum, if you get it in the classrooms from the teachers, and you teach it down, that kids will consider it as valid as mathematics or English or anything like that. And whether or not it can be tested doesn't really matter to me. I don't think it should matter, because it's about making the world a better place, and I really think that building from the ground up instead of trying to fix the problems from the surface is a much more effective way of going about things. In terms of cyberbullying and how that relates to cyberbullying, I honestly consider the cyber world, at least when you're in school, just an extension of the school day. You're hanging out with the same people online that you're hanging out with on the schoolyard. It's the same exact society. It's just online. It's in your house. You could, on your bed or whatever. So if you fix one, you're fixing the other. If you have respect for one another, and if you're not bullying each other in person, you're not going to be bullying these people online. And I think that if it's just a conducive environment and a friendly environment, it becomes a friendly environment online, and it just becomes a way to share jokes in your own home between one another. I know an issue was addressed about whether there should be spies online, principals online, teachers online. I know some schools require teachers to be online and other schools don't allow teachers to be online. I'll share my experience that I've been friends with several of my teachers since sophomore year, and these are the teachers like your teacher that you were explaining that everyone loved, and that's because they gave us respect and we gave them respect. And I think that actually being friends with these teachers online, one, if we ever had a problem, we were always able to contact them, and at any time of the day, which I think is very useful. If you create teachers who have empathy for their kids and respect their kids and truly care about their well-being, then having access to these teachers is fairly important, especially through high school when you're going through very stressful periods of time. And two, it does kind of restrict what you put online. You're not going to put the really nasty stuff online, the really cruel or whatever, because I respect my teachers. I don't need them seeing that. So I just think it's something to explore, to just consider the cyber world another version of the school world, just an extension of it. Lastly, I just mentioned I had some really great teachers, but I also think we really need to focus on, and something I thought was pretty much lacking from this program was that teachers could be bullies too. And I noticed in the definition of bully that it was, at least to me, it seemed like it was specifying youths and youths. And I just don't think that's true. In my high school that had no bullying between kids, there was bullying between adults and kids. We had chemistry teachers calling their kids stupid. We had English teachers calling out racial slurs, sexual orientation slurs. And this is in a community where there were several openly gay teachers, and they were still calling out kids who were gay, teasing kids who were gay, calling kids stupid who got lower grades on their tests. That's straight up bullying. And if they had tenure, they were completely protected by the school system. They could not get fired. They could not get disciplined. In fact, what happened, and I was one of the students called stupid by my chemistry teacher. I went to the school to complain. No discipline was made for the teacher. He'd been a teacher there for 10 years, 11 years, something like that. I was kicked out of the classroom, and they said it was for my safety, and that's probably true. I was glad to no longer be in the classroom. But the way that looked to the rest of the school population is that I was being punished for being bullied. And I feel like in this society where we put so much trust into our teachers because they're really the only communication that the upper world has with their students, we really need to make sure that stuff like that doesn't happen, can't happen, or is disciplined if it does happen. Teachers bring in their own biases, and if there are teachers like that in elementary school or in kindergarten, that's why we have many of these bullies in the first place. They're going to shape the kids' biases, and teachers are giving the impression that this kind of behavior is okay, the kids are going to think this kind of behavior is okay, especially if they're not, if there's no checks and balances for them. I think that if the teachers just went through the same type of training that we want these kids to go through, that if these programs weren't just for the kids, but if they were for the teachers, that if teachers were taught the same level of empathy that I hope the kids get, you're just able to kind of make a lot of these problems null before they even exist, which is, I think, the long-term and better plan to go about all of this. That way, we never have a problem to deal with, or the problems could be significantly reduced. So I think that's pretty much it. Thank you again, everybody. You guys are amazing.
Thank you. Rebecca. All right. First of all, thank you so much, Dr. Bradshaw, the Planning Committee, and the National Academy for inviting me to speak. It was truly such an honor to be here, and not just because I got to miss 2 days of school. One thing I just wanted to start out by saying was I wanted to state once again the importance of examining a school's climate and evaluating and changing social norms, because that's something that really resonated with me since the first time I heard it. And I think there's a lot of merit to things like trying to empower a bystander to speak up, or addressing individual instances of bullying and putting in disciplinary action. But ultimately, it rarely affects the underlying problem. And especially in sort of Psych 101, you hear about the bystander effect and how it's sort of a given that in our society, adults will act a certain way when everyone around them is acting that way. And to be that person who stands up and takes a stand takes social capital. And although I think it's great to try to empower students to do that, it also seems a little unfair that we would build an entire system around assuming that an awkward sixth grader is going to feel comfortable standing up to the cool kid and saying, hey, you shouldn't do that, leave that kid alone, which is amazing when it happens and it's incredible. But it's not, we can't build a society on that if we're not expecting that out of adults too. So I think what has resonated with me so much about the idea of changing a social climate is because in a circumstance where it becomes the norm to be more supportive and it becomes the norm to not bully, by going along with the norm, we're creating that better society. So Dr. Dodge's point really made sense to me. I liked the image that we must be cognizant of the norm we're setting forth as teachers or as leaders from the first day of middle school or even before that. We must be thinking about the kind of society we're creating so that to follow along with that is to create a positive school. And although deviant peer-only groups can be harmful, I think collaboration is really important, and it is important to keep students in the loop. I don't think it can come just from teachers or just from the powers that be, because it does need to come from a grassroots movement as well, and it needs to be something that resonates with students in order for it to become part of the students' norms. And beyond that, I really liked Dr. Juvonin's points about the importance of a heterogeneous social population at a school. And I thought it was so interesting, this idea that we can actually see these detectable differences between the way a minority student or a student in the majority responds to bullying and processes that bullying, because if, as she was saying, if it is true that in some cases students who are in the minority actually have an easier time processing bullying because it's almost easier to say, oh, well, it's not my fault. It's not that I'm a loser. This person's racist, or this person, there's something going on with them, and that's wrong. And I would love to see us eventually adjusting every student's cognitive framework so we can get to a place where they can cope and justify being bullied as saying, well, that's on them. That's not me. I'm not a loser. That's really their issue. And I think if we can give all students the tools to process it in that way, we can hopefully really reduce risks of depression down the line and hopefully even cutting down on suicides. Also, just the importance of interpersonal connections, as everyone on the panel has been saying. I do think it's so important that students have someone to turn to. A peer, just someone who they're seeing who's smiling at them. I think it's really, really important. Also, what Dr. Espelage said when she cited data that showed that in late middle school and in high school, a lot of anti-bullying programs cease to be effective and can actually be counterproductive. That makes a lot of sense to me, and it's something that is quite worrisome. And I think it really speaks to changing normative behavior. And instead of sort of having these one-off things like doing a poster or an assembly, which is not to say that that in and of itself is bad, but if it's not paired with an overall push towards changing a climate, it ends up coming across as more disingenuous. And I think that one thing that can be really worrisome is that as teenagers, I think we're all a little resistant to being told this is what you should think about this. And I think students are a lot smarter than even sort of just when we're talking about it in the hypothetical we're given credit for. And I think when students are shown that respect, they will often, and given the tools, given the sort of facts, they will be able to come to those conclusions as well, especially if they're led by people such as yourselves and people such as teachers who are educated and care about the issue. Sort of in my capacity as the president of the Anti-Bullying Leadership Network, I often receive emails and Facebook messages on our page of people talking about their own stories. And there are often parents, there are often students who will reach out and say, I'm bullied, here's my story, what do I do? And one thing that's been a tremendous resource to me is finding the page stopbullying.gov. It's a really, really excellent resource. And it's been really nice to find something that I could really stand behind and say, this is great. Because it's tremendously respectful to students. They have pages targeted towards children, targeted towards teenagers, and it really is the facts. And it's, you're in this state, here's what your legislature says, here's your options, here's who you can call in your neighborhood, and things like that I think are really, really great resources because it's not talking down to them. And I think a lot of students just want information. They want to know what they can do. So I feel like overall it's been sort of a blessing and a curse that bullying has become such a publicized issue recently, so much at the forefront of the American consciousness, because on one hand, it means that so many people care about it, and there are so many well-intentioned people who really want to do something, and I think that's so important because up until 10, 15 years ago, it wasn't an issue that got this much attention and this much legitimacy. But on the other hand, that does mean that there are a lot of ideas out there, and it's harder to parse through them, which is why it's so incredible that there is this push towards data-driven methods and things that'll really work, because there's such an importance overall of evidence-based programs that have been rigorously tested. And it really does seem like we're on the precipice of making a big difference, and I'm so excited to see that. So thank you.
Well, I'd like to thank all of our panelists for giving us your reflections and speaking so openly and really daring to tell us what was missing and what are the big questions we should be thinking about. And with that in mind, I think I'd like to start our question period with asking you all one question. And my question would be that, as you all mentioned, we've heard a lot the past couple days about evidence and about the importance of evidence-based practice, and you've all seen the top researchers talking about their research. We know evidence comes from research, and research really starts with a question that you want answered. So I would ask any of you to offer, if you could give us your one priority question, what is the one question that you would ask us as researchers to think about answering? I thought I'd do a nice, easy question for you.
So I guess I'll start this. Obviously, this program was fantastic, so thank you for allowing me to be a part of it. But most of the research was based on youth-to-youth bullying. And my question would be, is there any research on adult bullying youth? Asher touched on this, and so did Whitney. But personally, I've been through experience where I was bullied by a coach. So I would like to know, is there research being done on adults or teachers or coaches, even family members bullying other people and their kids, and what to do about that and what they see if it doesn't happen that often, or how kids should go about reporting it. So that's my question.
I would just like to see more of the scientific investigations like we've seen, we saw definitely yesterday, but something that gives hardcore information that these are the long-term effects, and we could sue you based upon these results because you truly are damaging people. I think that's something that could actually make a difference when we're combating the results of this.
Going along similar lines in regards to long-term effects, not necessarily something to be investigated, but rather something to be emphasized and pushed out there is former victims of bullying who have low self-esteem and how it's affected them in their lives, and to show the long-term impact of that. My mom was a victim of bullying for a while when she was younger, and she says it still affects her to this day. And if you have that out there, you could see the truly profound compounding effect of it that could maybe change something.
I'd love to just see more programs get tested. I think it's so important, and now it's so exciting to see those begin to get implemented in schools. So I think it's just really important to sort of continue to see that data-driven programs.
Great, thank you. I think did you have something to Asher? Go ahead.
Just along the lines of what I was talking about, some long-term research starting at a younger age before really grade school starts.
Great. I think we have time for one question from the audience, if anyone has one, or from the web. All right, well, please join me in a very warm thank you to our youth panelists.